very warm welcome to our guest of honor and speaker, General Sanjeev Narayan, who has agreed very willingly to talk to us right before our 75th Independence Day, which falls on the 15th of August. A special welcome to our chief guest, Mr. Suresh Chukapalli, Honorary Consul General of Korea, who will be in conversation with General Narayan. And of course, welcome to all the dignitaries and our participants in today's webinar here and on Facebook. I take this opportunity to share a brief about our organization, Rtambhara Wellness, which is a collective of like-minded individuals that look at wellness in a holistic way, not just the body, but the mind as well, and all through the practice of knowledge and wisdom that comes from ancient wisdom and global practices. We conduct corporate programs and retreats for wellness that look at personal transformation, and the details are available on our website, rtambharawellness.com. We also conduct webinars regularly, and our earlier talks are uploaded on YouTube under Rtambhara Wellness. In today's session, we will have a talk for 35 minutes by our guest of honor, followed by a conversation between him and our chief guest, Honorary Consul General of Korea, Mr. Suresh Chukapalli. After this, we will open it up for participants' Q&A. Feel free to post your questions on the chat function. In keeping with the security protocol, please do not pose any questions on matters of national security. Additionally, in deference to our speakers today, may I ask you all to keep your videos on and your mics muted. So let's get on with today's session and delve into character strengths learned through a career in the armed forces. I would like to call upon our Director of Operations, Mr. Rohan Naik, to introduce our guest of honor. Over to you, Rohanji.
Thank you, Binaji. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce General Sanjeev Narayan. Major General Sanjeev Narayan had a distinguished career spanning about 4 decades in the Indian Army. Having joined the prestigious National Defense Academy at Pune, he attended the final year of army training at the Military Academy and was commissioned into the infantry, the foremost battle arm in 1982. During the course of his career, he held various illustrious command, staff, and instructional appointments. Often in combat situations, he had the distinction of commanding a battalion comprising of 850 men and subsequently a division comprising of approximately 25,000 men in active combat situations in Jammu and Kashmir. This enabled him to develop a deep insight into the dynamics of human values and relations. He was also assigned to the United Nations Military Observer Mission in Iraq and Kuwait after the First Gulf War. Subsequently, while in charge of international cooperation with foreign armies, he traveled widely, including to Afghanistan, to safeguard national interests. In 2018, he spearheaded the Indian Army's flood relief operations in Kerala. General Narayan was applauded for his role and contribution by the Chief Minister. Having accredited himself in all facets of his career at various stages, based on merit, he was nominated to undergo all career-related courses that one desires during a career in the armed forces. Most notable were the courses at Defense Service Staff College, Army War College, and the National Defense College. Concurrently pursuing civil qualifications, he earned a master's degree in defense studies and master's in philosophy twice, once in defense and management studies, and the second time in defense and strategic studies. As an instructor at the Defense Services Staff College, he taught budding commanders operational art. Later, he was appointed the head of the enemy syndicate tasked to play out the role of our adversaries in high-level war games to help the Indian Army refine its strategic and operational doctrines. In recognition of the bold and innovative enemy plans formulated by him, he was awarded the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal by the President of India. The multifaceted training, an enviable track record in the armed forces, a wealth of experience in testing and trying conditions, and wide exposure to multinational and international agencies do suitably poise him for sharing his experiences and learning from his career with us. Thank you. Over to you, Binaji.
Thank you, Rohan. May I now invite our Director of Marketing and IT, Mr. Premnath, to introduce our chief guest, Mr. Suresh Chukapalli.
It's my proud privilege and pleasure to introduce our chief guest, Mr. Suresh Chukapalli. Mr. Chukapalli is highly reputed for his commitment towards business and social responsibility. In his pursuit of business goals, he has achieved many milestones. He's a dynamic leader who thinks out of the box and big from the word go. Mr. Chukapalli is the Chairman Emeritus of Phoenix Group, which is the most noteworthy name in real estate and infrastructure industry in India. As the Honorary Consul General of the Republic of Korea, Mr. Chukapalli enables trade cooperation, facilitates economic bilateral ties between India and Korea. Additionally, he also promotes scientific and educational cross-cultural pursuits between the two nations. Mr. Chukapalli is the Honorary Ambassador of Yonsei University, South Korea, which was established in 1885 and is one of the oldest universities in South Korea. Mr. Chukapalli is also the Honorary Chairman, Institute of Directors, Hyderabad. He is member of the Governing Council of Trustee in Indic Academy that seeks to bring about a global renaissance of Indic civilization thought. He is Director of Honorary Consular Code, Diplomatic India. Mr. Chukapalli was awarded Champion of Change 2019 by the former President of India, Sri Pranab Mukherjee. Performing a key role as a philanthropist under the leadership of Mr. Chukapalli, the group initiatives stretch around towns and villages, reaching out to communities, drinking water, promoting backward people, and helping the differently able people, and giving aids to the farmers, development of public spaces for promotion of art and culture, and modernizing crematorium spaces. In recognition of his pioneering work in upgrading and beautifying crematoriums in 2017, Phoenix Foundation has won Best Philanthropic Initiative Award for Vaikunta Mahaprasthanam under ACEF, which is the Asian Customer Engagement Forum Awards for Excellence in CSR. There is still a long list of national and international reputed organizations, trade, and social bodies which are privileged to have presence and involvement of Mr. Chukapalli. However, due to limitations in the time of a program, I'm unable to present them. Rtambhara Wellness is equally blessed to be guided by Mr. Chukapalli as a distinguished member of the Governing Council at Rtambhara. May I now request our guest of honor, General Narayan, to take over the virtual podium and present his talk, Character Strengths Learned Through a Career in the Armed Forces. Thank you.
Thank you, Premji. Rohanji, thank you for your kind introduction.
My pleasure.
Mr. Praveen Goenka, the Managing Director and Key Promoter at Rtambhara. Mr. Suresh Chukapalli, our Chief Guest this evening, and distinguished guest, Jai Hind. Thank you all very much for this opportunity that you have brought my way today to share my experiences on character strengths learned through a career in the armed forces. Actually, at the outset, I find it ironical that as a former military man, I've been asked to speak in the context of wellness, while the general impression of a person like me who's a licensed killer would be of an extremely destructive person in nature. This therefore throws before me the challenge of being able to capture the imagination of the audience that I have with me today. And that, of course, by relating my talk to wellness, which I think is the brief at Rtambhara. At the same time, I'm sure nobody wants me to miss out the essence or the fervor of a military life. So I have to walk a tightrope. To my mind, the best way to do this was to narrate the transformation that I experienced in my life with a special mention to those characteristics that I imbibed during the nearly 4-decade journey that would contribute to the overall wellness of any individual. I have accordingly structured my talk in 3 stages to highlight some of these aspects. Firstly, I want to bring before you where or who I was prior to joining the National Defense Academy. Thereafter, the period of training and what I learned from there, and finally the service career, which was the longest period. Let's begin with stage one, that was prior to joining the National Defense Academy. I was born in 1960 in a family in which there was already a relationship with the armed forces. My father was an Air Force officer, and hence there was no lack of opportunities. Luckily, God was also kind in bestowing fair amount of intelligence. Yet somehow, like all boys, I suppose, I managed to create tremendous anxiety for my parents by my unruly ways, and hence they remained extremely concerned for my future. Briefly looking back, I think the reasons for their worries were, firstly, I lacked direction. I didn't know what I wanted to do and which way I was headed. Those were the days when all parents wanted their sons to be either doctors or engineers. On their insistence, I too studied science and appeared for the entrance exams, but alas, it was not to be. Next, I was extremely disorganized. In fact, my room was a sight my mother detested. Nothing was in the storage spaces that are provided in the room. Everything was outside that, either on my bed. When I had to sleep, I had to pick up everything and throw it on my study table, which in any case I hardly used. Overall, perhaps I lacked direction, I think I lacked determination and dedication. However, riding on my intelligence and the good education that had come my way, I did manage a first division in high school, that is class 10, though it was barely. And yet next year I failed in class 11 to eventually pass in the supplementary exam, and finally obtained only a second division in the intermediate class, which was class 12. The last nail in the coffin was my not being able to make the cut in the medical entrance exams. Quite naturally, my father was furious, and he pronounced banbas, or exile as we know it in English, for me. I left for Bina, a place in wilderness between Jhansi and Bhopal, where my uncle was a professor in a government college, to pursue a degree in B.Com. Just prior to leaving, I went to meet my closest friend. He happened to be filling the entrance form for the National Defense Academy, and while doing so, he had spilled ink on a form and was filling a fresh form for himself. He believed a shabby form would render him ineligible. I filled that very shabby form very casually and left for Bina. After about 2 months, I came home briefly to write the entrance exam and thereafter returned to Bina, little knowing what fate had in store for me. Fortune took a turn. I qualified in the entrance exam, followed by a call for the interview in the Services Selection Board here itself in Bangalore, where I made the cut and was also found medically fit. I finally joined the NDA in January 79, and I think NDA has been aptly named as the cradle for leadership because it did wonders for me. This, ladies and gentlemen, was my childhood in a nutshell. Let us now move on to stage 2, that is training in NDA and IMA. Now, the first thing when you report in NDA is that they press the reset button on your personality. One is subjected to many such circumstances or incidents that result in one's personality being reduced to dust, thereby enabling it to be rebuilt in a desired manner. To name a few, for example, the first and the foremost is the haircut that we are given. Now, these are mass haircuts given in the grounds, the play fields that are there. We all sit on chairs in rows and the barbers are working away on our nuts. You can imagine this being done to somebody who's wearing bell bottoms and has long hair. The net result is something: when you go home at the end of your first term, your mother fails to recognize you. I rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door and she said, "Whom do you want to meet?" I said, "Ma, it's me." "Who's this me? Get away from here." That was her reaction. And I thought it was only for me. This happened to my son, who also joined the armed forces, when he came back home, and my wife did this to him. So that is the transformation that takes place. There are very strict dress regulations. There's a dress for every event of the day, starting from when you wake up, for the physical training, for the drill square, thereafter for the classes, for dinner, and depending on the season, and many other things in between. And you have to be correct in terms of dress. So things were starting to work on me. I had been very disorganized, but here things were being put in place. There were rigid schedules. And we were also undertaking, our baths were in mass and in our birthday suits. So I think we were just being broken. In fact, I made a mention that day on the, I was having an interaction. There was a punishment called brainwash, which was actually, we were taken to the Indian commodes that were there, and the flush was pulled, our heads were pushed into it, and the flush was pulled on us. So we felt like dust at the end of it and ready to be now built into a personality. So what was the training like then? The training was intense. Bicycles were not meant to be ridden. They were meant to be around our necks. We were carrying them for the length and breadth of the academy. I don't remember when I really rode them. They were only a mass of metal around our necks. Rolling, whether it was side or front rolling, was the mode of movement. Nobody would allow us to be on our feet. Our backs were starting to give away. Like I mentioned earlier, there was only the use of authorized item in dresses, and in fact, only those issued. Nothing private, not even a transistor. The layout of the room was as per pictures provided to us. Everything had to be in place, typically as given in the picture, and nothing could be out of place. Otherwise, we will draw punishment. There are 6 terms in India. There was a gradual buildup of privileges. Our satchel, that is the bag we carried, had to be crossed, and it took quite some while before we could carry it only slung on one shoulder. Otherwise, it'll be crossed. The dresses and timing for toilets. As we grew in the terms, we got freedom. Otherwise, as a first termer, we had to put on complete night suit, the dressing gown, and what comes with it. Everything with our belt tight, we couldn't be walking. So gradually, the privileges came and we grew with that. And the academy as such is being run by these 6 termers. So as we were growing, the responsibilities were being pushed onto us. I mentioned punishments. Mentioning punishments. Punishments were collective. Often without even knowing what the fault was and was committed by which coursemate of yours. We were just beckoned for the punishments and used to go there and suffer the punishments or be put through the punishments. We were also liable as we grew for punishments of failings of our juniors, because it was taken as our failure if we could not enforce the juniors behaving in the expected manner. But there was a good thing. The academics that we had there catered for all-round academic development and awareness. And the canvas was from international relations down to the carpentry, foundry, and machining, which we did with our own hands. So we were getting wise on a variety of issues. What then did we pick up from that 3 or 4 years of training? Firstly was mental strength and determination. Long route marches, sometimes 20 kilometers, sometimes 30 kilometers with the battle load, which was about 17 kgs on our back, and with a personal weapon about 3.5 kgs. really taught us that it is not the human body which lacks endurance, it is the mind. If you accept it in your mind that you can do it, you can do anything, you can do wonders. So it is not the human body in true terms. Focus. We had to assimilate instructions and follow them in letter and spirit. If we didn't do it, there were punishments like the seventh heaven. Now our cabins in NDA on top have got these metal grills, squares. We see that small 2-inch or 3-inch square grills that we have, and each cabin can be looked into. So the seventh row is something in which we had to hang ourselves and keep hanging till we were asked to come down. So those are the kind of punishment we went through. So we learned how to be focused, how to listen very carefully, know the expectations, and then carry out the orders, which was a very good thing, because half of the time when orders are being passed to us in normal life, we start thinking of how we are going to execute without listening to the complete requirement. But here it was drilled down us, please understand what needs to be done and then do it properly. The cabin cupboard is the way, I mean, it's an inspection of our rooms, which is done every day when we left for our training. Our clothes in the cupboard had to be at the specific place, and in their folds, we had to put cardboard every day. So that was the time and the preciseness in which our clothes were folded to the correct size with a cardboard front, which was of a particular size, and all clothes were folded and kept in that manner. Camaraderie really built up. There was no owning up of who made the mistake during the punishments. It was actually quite ironical that, when you didn't own up, you got punished more and more. But if you did happen to own up, you would get punished even more, because that was seen as a reflection of you being weak and having let down your postmates. So it was between the devil and the deep sea. So the punishments continued, and there was going to be never any owning up, which is something which is required when you are taken as a prisoner of war. You can't be giving away information. So it was drilled down us, and how loyal we were to be to our country and our mates was really taught to us in that manner. Resourcefulness. We learned to manage as no excuses were acceptable. You happen to land up at the parade ground, you go for PT, you come back, you have to change into your drill dress, which you've carried on your bicycle, and you find your shorts are missing. Nobody is going to listen to you. You'll be absent from parade. You cannot go without shorts. So what do? You can't go in white shorts. They have to be khaki shorts. So we learned from people who were moving out from parade to quickly take their shorts. We had to judge the size, it will fit us. And within the time, which used to be in seconds or minutes, no time more than that. In each term, I mentioned the privileges grew. So when we didn't have the privileges, we accepted our status. We learned to accept our status, that this 6 months, this is where we are. This is the freedom we have. This is the freedom we don't have. So mentally, it made us very resilient, that we knew this is it and we have to cope with this. Same time, there was patience to wait your turn and accept and carry out responsibilities. Another thing we learned was value for time. One of the punishments we had was changing dresses. And the time used to be given was, again, sometime half a minute, sometime 1 minute. And we had to go and change dresses. And they had also improvised dresses as combinations of the dresses we had. So they could be any of the 40. So first, you had to be aware of what you are expected to turn out in. Run to your cabin, put on the dress in no time, and come down for the following. If you didn't, your punishment will continue. If you manage, perhaps you will be excused. And hence we learned punctuality, time management, and to find time for sleep, which was very important. In fact, we learned to sleep while walking. That may be surprising, but we were able to do it. We just put our hand on the person in front of us and went to sleep and our legs kept moving. So that is the effect that the training had on me, or most of us, as we go through it. And this is all that we learn. Finally, coming to stage 3, that is the service career. And this is a little longer period. Since it is the rest of the 4 decades, that's about 36 years, I'll spend a little bit more time here. Firstly, let me just dwell upon the environment which is there within the Indian Armed Forces for the understanding of others. See, the Indian Armed Forces is a mix of the urban and rural. The urban is normally the leadership, and rural are the soldiers. So that's it. This is the relationship of an officer and soldier, and it's an urban and rural relationship. What does it get with it? There is a huge lot of cultural difference, physical abilities, and attitude to life. That is how the things are so different. And you've got to understand the men, understand thoroughly to be able to handle them, and not in peace, but to handle them in war. I mean, when I went first, somebody's mic came on, sorry. When I went for my first temporary duty to place, I traveled to Bikaner, and I was looking for my toothbrush. I couldn't find it. And the buddy, we have a system of buddies in the army who's your everything buddy, or we call him as Saik. He was out to get something. Perhaps he'd gone to get my breakfast. When he came back, I said, oh no, or was it bed tea? Something like that. I said, where's my toothbrush? I can't find it. He says, I kept it safe and sound. I said, where? He said, I fixed it on the shoe brush. So on the shoe brush, he had fixed my toothbrush. That is their sense of hygiene, sanitation, and everything. So that is the thought who does wonders for us. I mean, they are marvelous soldiers, but that is the kind of dealing which was there. Our weapon actually is the soldier. If you see in 1965 operations, these were the tank operations in the Battle of Asal-Uttar, where we only had Sherman tanks which were much inferior. We've heard about the Patton tanks. All of us have heard about that. But the Indian Army soldier was able to destroy the Patton tanks of Pakistan, which had been given by America. And actually, Pakistan came to war in 65 because they thought these tanks will do wonders. But Asal-Uttar battle of Khemkaran is known as the graveyard of Patton tanks. All the tanks you see displayed all over the country are tanks which were destroyed there by our boys with inferior tanks. Similarly, they had the Sabre and the Staff fighters, which were much superior to our Nats, but we know how our Nats perform. So the soldier is the weapon. And we've got to understand their the troops because they're peculiar. You know, they're either from regions or of a class or of a caste. Our regiments are based on that. Therefore, to understand them, we travel to their villages as also stay with them when we go to the units till we are able to develop a good rapport and good understanding. We use their toilets, we eat their food, stay with them at all times. And the regiment, therefore, you must have heard of Rajput, Kumaon, Sikh, Gurkha. It is in this manner. And the armed forces, like all of us know, we are part of a system with no scope for deviation. Therefore, what did I pick up? The first thing was trust. Can I march in a, say, field area, maybe in a jungle or in a mountainous area with the not having trust on a person behind me who is heavily armed? There is no way. I'm not concerned of who's behind me because we trust each other. He could be of any religion, any caste, any place. We could have fought, we could have done anything, but we will never hear that when an army officer is marching, a soldier behind him knocked it off. It will never happen. We trust each other. In fact, the trust is so much that the first thing, how do we develop it? The day we reach our units, our wallets, our keys, everything is handed over to our buddy. Thereafter, he only tells you when the money is over, that money is over. He handles it. He spends it, how he does it, we don't even ask him question. It's a total trust. In fact, I'm reminded of an incident. This was about 14,000 feet, and our battalion was inducting into the line of control on the Kashmir border. And one of the soldiers' rifles came off his shoulder and slipped down a steep slope on the left-hand side, which was all snow. And we could not even hear where it went and fell. But the rifle had gone, we had to recover it. So there was another young officer marching with me. He said, okay, you can tie a rope around my waist and send me down. And we were all carrying ropes which were 100 meters long. That was so that we each put it through our belts so that if somebody slips, then he doesn't get lost or he can't go away, because the other 99 will work as an anchor. So I tied one rope. That whole rope we lowered. I tied another one, lowered him further. I tied 4 ropes. That means he had gone down 400 meters somewhere looking for that rifle in a pitch dark night. And then the commanding officer came from behind and asked me, Sanjeev, what's up? I said, sir, Rtambhara is at the other end of the rope and he's gone to pick up the rifle if we can find it. He said, you've gone nuts. And how can he trust you? I said, sir, we both trust each other and hopefully we'll get the rifle. And we did manage to get it. So that is the kind of trust, that person can go down. Dignity of human being in life and death. We are very conscious of what orders we give to the soldiers. We cannot make them do undignified things, and that is what is about human relations. But if it is to be done, we will undertake that action ourselves first, so that they don't feel belittled. As regards death, it has been amply demonstrated that how we care for also the enemy dead. These incidents came up in Kargil, and one of the units, the Pakistanis came and asked for the bodies back, and they said, this unit that is there is where Field Marshal Manik Shah used to be there pre-independence. So, and they evoked those links and brought out. Very important thing, and I think this is a great learning, is that we don't have personal biases and prejudices. I want to refer a few incidences here, and I'm sure they'll be interesting. First one is of Second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal Paramveer Chakra of 1971 war. Many years later, after Arun Khetarpal had died in the Battle of Basantar, his father decided to travel to Pakistan because he had migrated from Sargodha. He was received at the airport by a Brigadier Khwaja Mohammad Nasser of Pakistan. And he took care of his entire travel. He sent him to Sargodha, and then Brigadier Khetarpal came back to Lahore. He stayed 3 days with Brigadier Khwaja Mohammad Nasser. The third day, Brigadier Khetarpal was feeling something is amiss. But then he kept quiet about it, and he saw sympathy in the eyes of Mrs. Nasser. Eventually that night, eyes broke, and Brigadier Nasser told Brigadier Khetarpal that I was the one who killed your son. And I've been carrying it on my mind ever since, and I want to put it off my heart. Brigadier Khetarpal stayed on for the night in that house. And he came back. And when he came back, when he opened his luggage, in that luggage, there was a note from Brigadier Nasser saying that your son was a brave boy. And because of his braveness, my unit got defeated in that war. So Nasser didn't have the prejudice that Khetarpal had defeated his unit. And at the same time, he looked after his parents. So that is how we don't carry these things beyond the call of duty. Similarly, in Kargil operations, Brigadier Bajwa recommended one of the officers of Pakistan who got killed for Nishan-e-Haider, that is Pakistan's highest gallantry award. And how he did that was he sent the note along with the body, and Pakistan gave that award to that officer. A similar case had also happened in 71, where General Airy had recommended an award and it was given. My boss in Iraq Kuwait, which was mentioned that I served in Iraq Kuwait, was a Pakistani colonel called Falak Sher Khalid. He relied on me for his fried egg and tea every morning. One, he was incapable, and second, I think he enjoyed an Indian do that for him. Nevertheless, the Pakistan contingent, which was there in uniform, were being picked out for reading their namaz during duty. They wanted a hidden place. All of them took duplicate keys for the Indian contingent's rooms, and that is where they used to come and read their namaz and go. And they had duplicate keys for that. In fact, the Chinese military observer who was there in uniform was a major, and he was my deputy. He was working as my deputy. He was posted as my deputy. One day he confided to me that since this is the first United Nations missions in which Chinese officers have been sent, I'm actually a brigadier, but sent as a junior officer. I made it a point thereafter to at least, when not in public, look after his seniority, give him his due. There was a Brigadier Sarfraz Sattar, who was the defense attaché of Pakistan and India. And in the embassy parties of my family and his family generally spend time together because one, the language clicked, and perhaps because my wife's family came from Pakistan too, so there was closeness. Of course, we never shared information of importance. So they were together. Subsequently, when I was commanding the division in Jammu, this gentleman was on the other side. I think none of us paid each other. We were the best of friends while we were in India, and later on we did what we had to do to each other. He did to me, I did to him. Currently, he is in house arrest for having objected to the extension granted to General Qamar Bajwa, the present Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan. Another thing we learned was attitude to life. Fearless. We had to accept fate, because you didn't know which bullet had your name written on it. There were incidents that we were standing and bullets were falling all over us, but nothing happened. And I have seen incidents when one bullet has been fired and it takes a man away. So it's a matter of fate. You don't know what God has scripted for you. Accordingly, things are going to unfold. So forget about it and live fearlessly. That is something we learn. Another thing is valuing relationships for a lifetime. So when the British Indian Army officers of the Rajput Regiment left when we attained independence, when they went back to London or Britain, they established a diners club, Rajput Diners Club there, for all the officers of the regiment to get together. And they used to invite the Indian Army officers of the regiment, I am from the Rajput Regiment, to travel to London and go and attend the annual dinner they used to have. Not only us, the officers of our regiment who had gone on partition to Pakistan were also invited. This has been continuing. It has not been discontinued. In fact, the grandchildren also come down to our regimental center in Fatehgarh. Those officers are no more. But the grandchildren are still part of the regiment. They come down here and they still invite there. Of late, they stopped it because the grandchildren were finding it difficult. But the associations continue for so long. Another incident I'm reminded of is when General A.K. Niazi, who surrendered in East Pakistan, then East Pakistan, subsequently Bangladesh, when he was taken captive and came to India, he was also of the Rajput Regiment pre-partition. So he asked for a guard from his battalion that was for Rajput. And it was honored. He was provided the guard, I am told. So those associations, I mean, you may be a prisoner of war, you may be hated, but such associations are honored. Similarly, compassion for men and their families. Our wives are very, very active because the soldiers' families do need to be looked after. And we are also care about the soldiers. Our communications, clear, truthful, and respectful. We are always very conscious that we should not hurt the dignity of our men when we speak. Nobody has given us a right with our ranks to be abusive or arrogant with our men. Just imagine his wife is cooking lunch and I shouted on him or abused him, when he goes home, will he even know or realize what he's eating? He will be in such a foul mood. So we've learned to be careful and cautious of how we treat men. Obedience. Obedience is without questioning. I want to share a funny incident about this. Men of the Gorkha regiment were going for map reading training. And when they went for the training, because they were to be taught longitudes and latitudes, they were told that the earth is round or earth is a globe. But the Gurkha soldier looked, it was a flat area, and said, how can it be? We can only see flat land. So again, the instructor told them, no, it's not so. It's a long distance. Eventually, it is round. But they refused to listen. And finally, nothing would break ice there. So they went back to their unit. But this was reported to the second in command of the unit that your soldiers are not budging. How do we take them ahead in this? So the second in command went to the CO. We have something called a battalion routine order. That is where what the CO says or what the orders are also published and written so that they are on record and kept. So CO said, don't worry about it. Just pass an order that the earth is round and read it out in the evening that CO Saab says earth is round. The Gurkha said, Huncha. That means, okay, agreed, sir. If it is CO order, earth is round. So that is the level of obedience the soldiers and all of us imbibe in our life. You may call it stupid, but it is required. Because if we question, I don't know the direction in which the armed forces will go. Another issue that gets imbibed in us is decisiveness. And it gets imbibed because we have to be quick at it. We have to be quick. We can't waste time. We were laying a minefield. My unit was laying a minefield in Oprakram right under the enemy's nose in front of his post because we were expecting to come across an attack. He got to know. We were in the minefield. There were mines all over us. He got to know. He opened fire. Now, do we keep standing or do we lie down where we may blow ourselves in mines? It's a decision to take. We took the decision to lie down. I'm here, still here in front of you speaking today. So obviously I survived that incident. Resilience. And I can relate this resilience to something, what goes on today. With the COVID situation, imagine a bunker where an officer is for 6 months. He doesn't have electricity, sub-zero temperatures, no running water. He uses a pit for the morning ablutions and puts back soil. That's how he lives there. And he lives for 6 months. In the name of entertainment, nothing. And what do we hear here? The discussion on the televisions. Where is the resilience of people? COVID-19 times, lockdowns, 14-day, Amazon delivering, milk basket, big basket, everybody coming home, delivering all your rations, delicious, fresh to home, Netflix, entertainment, electricity, ACs, running water, and life is tough. How can it be? Just imagine what is the life of the soldier. So why I bring this up is it's not tough. It's all in the mind. It's how you look at it. The soldier has accepted it, that is his life. So he keeps taking his stride. Again and again he goes to field and he lives through such conditions all his life. Couple of more points. Alertness. I think you can't afford to be not alert in the armed forces. So I think for everybody, it's important. You should be alert. You should know what's happening around you at all times. Don't switch yourself off to the world. You've got to be sharp and aware of what's going on around you. And innocence normally is calm before a storm. So we need to be very, very alert. Have pride in whatever we do. Appearance. I have a couple of minutes. I'll just touch upon this. Appearance is very important. I would refer to an incident at my very home. My son, who's in the Indian Navy, he was under training those days. So our doorbell rang and I asked him to just go and attend to the doorbell. He went there and he came back and said, there is some soldier there. So I said, how do you know there's some soldier there? He says, because he asked me, is Saab is there? So actually a colonel had come and my son, both of them were not looking like officers. And both of them could not place them each other. That colonel who had come thought my son was a soldier and vice versa. So that is the relevance of how you carry yourself, appearance. We learn that. Self-discipline is important. I can't be with a, because I'm seen so much, I'm wearing a tie and a jacket and I'm wearing shorts below. I think that's self-discipline. If you're dressing, you have to be fully dressed. So it's about following discipline when not being seen by anyone. General awareness, again, very important. Adaptability. With our frequent transfers, we've learned adaptability. We have to, every time we go to new place, new job, new work, new accommodation, we may get accommodation, may not get accommodation, different temperatures, Rajasthan to the Siachen Glacier. So that is another thing we have imbibed. Psychological aspect. I learned about this during the Kerala floods. When the floods were receding, I found there were a large number of suicides taking place. Now, it brought to my mind that everything has got a deep psychological angle to it. And we must all look at that aspect. Physical comfort is never enough. You must address the psychological aspects. I could rally the Pandits, the Maulvis, the Padris, take them out and organize tennis ball cricket and slush and everything and lift the spirits of the men, and the cases came down. So I'm really happy I could do that. But these are aspects we need to think of. So these are a few of the issues I thought I must highlight, which I picked up for my life. The philosophy for us, therefore, is that hope for the best. We're always positive. We hope for the best, but plan for the worst. If you do that, you will never fail. Don't plan on hope. That's a wrong way to do things. And the COVID situation going on right now, you can exercise this aspect there and see. So you see, because most of us tend to go to eating places, that plan has been built on a hope that nothing will happen to us. You have to plan for the worst, take all the protection and hope for the best then. In sum, for me, being in the armed forces is a way of life. Once you adopt it, it becomes addictive. Perhaps that is precisely why I, as an IF officer's son, joined the army, married the daughter of a regimental officer, who is also a granddaughter of an officer of the Royal Indian Army Medical Corps, taken captain in World War II by the Japanese in Malaya. My daughter is married to a third generation officer in the Gorkha regiment. My son is in the Indian Navy and married to an army officer's daughter. Like I say, wedding cards cost extra at our place because everyone had a rank. Ladies and gentlemen, I will end on that note. Sureshji, I am now your witness and available for cross-examination.
That was wonderful, really wonderful, Sanjeevji. And, it's very nostalgic and it's a great, real life story of yours. And salutations to you and the entire armed forces, and particularly to the families of armed forces. I understand, but for the families' support and strength, I'm sure you would not be able to deliver what you had delivered so far. And it's a great sacrifices the families of armed forces are doing for this country. And this nation is very, very proud of all of you. And we eternally are blessed to have the sons of the soil who are greatly devoted to the well-being of all of us.
Thank you.
As you rightly said, we are enjoying life. We are sitting in the air-conditioned rooms. We worry about 1 or 2 days lockdown. But, as you rightly pointed out, what is the life of these soldiers, young boys and girls, in the bunkers, staying, minus 30 degrees, plus 60 degrees or 50 degrees. It's a real, phenomena which we can't even imagine. And particularly today's youngsters, we don't imagine what is happening in the borders of our country. And thanks to all of you, we are safe, and you have protected us for the last 74, 75 years, and your ranks are protecting us even further. I would thanks to Rtambhara, Binaji, Pravinji, all of them have given a task for me to, I'm not saying it's a cross-examination, but I would try to see if I can elicit something out of your mind for us to understand a bit more about what happens in the mind of a soldier when they get into a battlefield, and what gets into the mind of the families when their near and dear ones are in the battlefield and they don't know when they get the good news or the bad news, or how they need to take it on themselves. We have witnessed several cases of late because of the social media and other things. Several cases where young soldiers' coffins, come back, and we have seen, young officers die, and young women getting widowed, children losing their father, and we have also seen some of the young ladies going back and saying that, yes, my husband died, but I'm ready to serve the country. So I want to understand the psyche of the officers and their families during these tough times. Sanjeevji?
Yeah, so I think it's the most crucial issue. So I will first talk about the officers and the men. Firstly, like I said, the attitude to life or the fear of death, we are very lucky that our rural lot, it's amazing that they don't fear death. Naturally, we have seen it, we have to keep telling them to be careful, otherwise you will die. So we have firstly a brave lot, which we are talking of, and I'm talking of our men. So that is the asset we start with. Now, to say that there is no fear would be lying for anybody. It is an instinct. Everybody wants to live. But what happens is, I suppose, it is the call of the duty. It is honor, which you have to respond and get into the battlefield. Having got into the battlefield, as a leader, I think you're always conscious that you're being watched. So there is no place for you to exhibit fear. Let me put it that the fear may be within, but you can't exhibit it because you have other people's life dependent on what you're doing there. So as a leader, I think gradually what I spoke about, so many things, you learn the art of getting out of this fear psychosis, which it begins with. But subsequently, what takes over is the other aspects, and you have to perform, and hence people perform. You will find very few narrations of cowardice, but many about being very brave. What makes us do it is all of you. All of you, when I say, is the government in time and the people of the country who are sensitive and are caring for whom we may leave behind. When we have that assurance, which over the years, a lot has been done for our families, but not to say that the soldiers who went earlier or in the Second World War, even when it wasn't done for their families, didn't find it easy. It is the nature of an army man because of his training, and he's been tuned and brought up in that manner that he starts thinking in this manner, and he forgets about what lies what lies behind it. However, as far as the families are concerned, it is the same feeling. One, they know that their husband has gone for a very honorable job. And this is the call of the duty. He has no option. He has to do or die. That is the way it is. And if it is scripted by God, nothing can save him. So what they look at is, okay, he's gone. He will perhaps do us proud in some way. And if he doesn't come back, it's an adversity. You have to deal with it and life must go on. I think it is just this psychology right from the beginning. So hence we organize things, we leave it in a good manner because we know it may happen. I'm talking about the army people. Think about a fighter pilot who goes up in the air all by himself on a regular basis. And we know, a singular jet aircraft can fall out of the sky anytime. So the lady sees him off after breakfast at the airfield. They're living in the airfield. He goes up and they're extremely grateful as and when the officer lands in the evening. So I think we learn to live with it. It becomes a way of life. And so thus it goes.
Yeah, and one more, Sanjeev ji.
Yes.
Today, the discipline and the characteristics of an officer or a soldier is such a great, is of such great importance. Do we see an opportunity for inculcating similar disciplines in our educational system so that, of course, we have the NCC and other, core subjects in the schools, but still, I personally feel there is a lot more which could be done in our education system and to guide the youth in the right way, both psychologically and also patriotically for their country. And also, in addition to that, the discipline which are taught with to the officers or the men would also be useful for the children in their lives when they're doing even private jobs.
Yeah, you have a point, and any amount of discipline is never enough. The point is that the rigors of training that we go through, I think are able to get us to those levels. Like I said, they press the reset, remold us. Can we do it to the others? Maybe their roles are different, may not be required. Yes, I'm not saying that the society in general should not be disciplined. There's a lot desired. In fact, I've traveled to China, and when we travel abroad, we see how the traffic rules are followed. So all these are aspects, but I think they will gradually come from real education. What perhaps is lacking in our context is, this practical education, it's not being pushed enough. So if all these civic sense and all these are very seriously enforced in these schools, I think that is the kind of discipline we need with the common public. So when that is being brought, and our enforcement needs to be very good. Sometimes perhaps I think being a democracy, we are soft on the people. So these have been the issues. But as an organized thing, that intense discipline driving, we may find it difficult. I mean, NCC is there, like you mentioned. But do we take NCC to a next level? Or we don't need draft. In our country, we've got enough people. So how do we get there? I mean, me, it looks...
Sanjeev ji, discipline is not something which I'm talking about on the terms of the army discipline. But in my opinion, discipline, camaraderie, and the patriotism which gets developed in a soldier or an officer is something which we may have to bring into the system at the very young age. In addition to that, even what I find is, even though both are armed forces, the armed forces or both are the uniformed forces, the armed forces and the police, there is a vast difference between these two. When I say vast difference, the camaraderie, the patriotism, the discipline, and the sacrifices done by army and other armed forces are also there in police, but to my knowledge, there is a lack of true camaraderie in some disciplines. So would there be a possibility that officers like you, who have served for 3 to 4 decades, and come out and you're still having your strengths to teach, would it not be a good idea for people like you to teach in the police academies of our country, both the state and the center? Because I don't find many armed forces officers in the police academies.
Yeah, so you see, firstly, we become separate services over the year. There have been some little transfers to the paramilitary forces like BSF and all that. But I think, all these services, the police, the defense forces, the paramilitary forces have distinct roles. And we kind of develop towards that. The army, fortunately, I think for no reason, because the stock that is coming is the same, So, I mean, at the entry point, the raw material is the same. Army, I think, is able to focus much more on these aspects because we are most isolated from public dealings within. So we are not there. The police has to deal on a regular basis with the public and the criminals. And I think that takes them in that direction. I wouldn't say, this service is bad or this service is good. I won't prescribe it. I functioned in J&K with the police. I functioned with the PSF. We have had no problem at all of any kind of in functioning or in obedience of orders or following of orders. We've been brilliant teams together. So it isn't that. But what is the police role? I think also, for the fact which I mentioned, that they deal with the people and the criminals, and hence they deal in a very different way. It's a different ballgame. We deal.
No, Sanjeev ji, my this thing is, we have all respect for police. Thanks to them, this country had never had any law and order problems. So all salutations to them. My only concern is the continuing training to these people, which will upgrade them to a different level always, because we have been seeing several other countries, the police forces, how they are kept alert always in terms of their physical fitness and things like that. In addition to all these things, I would like to understand, if I'm not wrong, you are a major general, and in the country, in the entire armed forces, you would be a maximum of 0.5% major generals in the country. So you are one of the elite 0.5% of the entire armed forces, if I may be corrected.
Yeah, that's right.
So that means, you have obtained the pinnacle of the services. And how have you looked at when you are at that peak, and looked down and saw what are the achievements you have made, and how you could improve the armed forces if and when you can, or whatever disciplines or whatever trainings, whatever new intellectual learnings, what you can, and maybe write a book about that and, get it published?
Yeah, so many books are written, but in the nature of the employment, when we come to the last few years, Army is peculiarly conscious of this, and the appointments we get are, director generals of various arms or services, or in the perspective planning, military operations. So the role you get at that time is not limited to current, and there is a lot of futuristic, which in our wisdom is there. But in the same breath, let me tell that, from the time I came and when I passed out in that 40 years, I perhaps have the ability to look another 5 years. Things start changing very soon. So, but for 5 years, next 5-year plan, as we used to have in the past, and a long-term plan, they are all there. And we've been part of it before we left with all our experience. Put it in place. What happens thereafter is the next crop. They come up and things are changing so fast, and we better change because there is no runners-up trophy in the game we play. It is either our adversary or us. And hence, till a point in time, we have a role. Thereafter, we get into advisory or when somebody asks us about something or our opinion. But since things change and need to be very current, the next generation takes on very, very soon. And which is within a span of 2 to 3 years, things start changing. And we become rusty. That's how the things go, to my mind.
But how is your hierarchical structure, and do you really think the hierarchical structure is, to today's, new generation, members of the forces?
Yeah. So, firstly, the hierarchical structure is very typical of the armed forces. We have a very strict chain of command, top to bottom. My thought about, it's required. It's required because you cannot have the army chief directly controlling such huge numbers of men. So the command at various levels is very, very important. It has to be there. Now, for it to function, how will it function? Firstly is we need to maintain the sanctity of the chain of command. Meaning, it is incorrect for a senior to interfere in the junior's command. He should not get. He must command through the commanders at the various levels. So at level 1, he must pass only orders to level 2. And similarly, level 3, 4, and 5. So we have a set pattern. And what is that? At the higher levels, we only give directives, which are very, very broad and spell out the aim and what is the result required. At the next level, we have instructions. They get a little bit more details. And finally, we have orders which are very, very detailed. So that is how we structured directives, instructions, orders to make things work. And as also to allow space for functioning at all levels, because the higher lieutenant general, let's take a lieutenant general, can't get into the functioning of a colonel. He has told him what is required, where his battalion has to reach, what has to be captured. That's it. Let him do it thereafter. So that's how we maintain. And actually, it is not possible because he's got a job to do. He's got to see when this fails, how am I to support that failure? How do I make sure then? Oh, something will fail somewhere. So how is he going to influence the battle at that point in time? So he should be worried at his level. The junior man should be worried at his level. And we have it very clear. We understand it and we deliver accordingly. If the senior man is to interfere downwards, then there is trouble. We are playing with the sanctity of the chain of command. And that commander will feel very belittled if the senior comes and starts interfering in his command. So we don't let
And Sanjeev ji, what is your advice to the present day youngsters?
Oh, I hope that.
My question is, your present day youngsters, your advice from the army's mind, on the teamwork, what you have in the army, on the teamwork, on the planning, meticulous planning you do for any operations, and the entire strategy and drive you bring in, and the support systems and the camaraderie within the teams. So all these things as an army's mind, would you be able to guide or advise the present day youngsters in their daily lives, in their companies, in their jobs, in their daily activities? What is your guidance to them?
Right. So I hope they don't hang me for that. So first and foremost, I think, the rhythm in life. Let me just explain that further. Firstly, we are not nocturnal animals. I'm seeing an increasing tendency to be up by the night and be sleeping by the day. So you have to get the rhythm to life. When I say rhythm to life, be in the nature's rhythm. Firstly, nature has put a sleeping time for us, an awake time, unless inescapable. Army keeps awake for 3 nights when required, not otherwise. So get the rhythm. Eat in time. Eat what must be eaten. Don't eat what must not be eaten. For enjoyment once in a while, by all means. So first thing is, I think that rhythm, rhythm of work, sleep, rest, and all that must be brought in your life. And it should be perfect. It should perfect in the sense, don't let it go haywire. Don't lose control of your own life. Second, I would say is in today's time is very important is to be analytical. There is a plethora of information which is flowing. Use your mind, apply it. Don't believe what comes on the net. Don't believe what comes on WhatsApp. There is a lot of propaganda on by a whole lot of agencies. We as human beings have the analytical power to read between this and come to know what is correct. And we should be aware of that. We don't have to teach others, but we for ourselves need to know what may be the correct thing. Then a work-life balance. I think it is so important. It's not only profession, it is your personal life. It is you yourself. You've got to balance everything. Your appearance, when I say appearance, is not what God gave you. It's what you do to yourself. How do you look after your body? How do you find time for it, for your mental well-being? What clothes do you wear? Are they appropriate for the occasion? Do you make a mark by having a good pen in your pocket? If you go to an hospital well-dressed, you will be attended to before others. It is so important. So, I mean, what we see today is people working from home in t-shirts, shorts and slippers, and also walking out in that. I mean, you are at work. Some degree of formalness, after all, we're coming on video calls, is always a good thing. So I would say, if somebody rings your bell at 2 in the night in distress, and if you go in a good night suit, smartly dressed and attend to the door, I think your image is going to go up many, many times. And somebody who comes in, one shabby t-shirt, which is off one shoulder, almost off one shoulder because it's become so loose, and some short, which is falling off. So all these things are important, and the youth must imbibe. A good team member, to work as a good team member, we all have to work as good team members. Every team has a goal and a structure. We need to know where we stand in that structure. Where are we? What and is it that I have to do? We are very good advisors to the seniors and guidance to the juniors. What are we doing about what I'm supposed to do? So yes, till the time the decisions are being made, please give your recommendations, please give advice. Once the decision made, with your heart and soul, please get down to implementing what you are to do and forget about what your boss is doing. Because that stage is over. How do we solve various problems in life? We come across them. It's very simple. What is the problem? What is the aim to solve it? What are the factors or the terms of reference which are binding? So first identify that to solve this problem, these are the terms of reference which are binding. Then there are factors which impact it. Please analyze the factors. We jump to conclusions. We have to, for a simple travel, we don't think about everything. Analyze the factors, then see what are the options available. No option is ever perfect. So again, analyze them and see which is the best option, adopt it. What does it take to implement it? And please implement it. So the mental faculties have to be alive at all times.
Sanjeev ji, the armed forces have always risen to the occasion when the country or the occasion demanded. What gets into your mind during those times, of the being alert and being rising to the occasion? What are your feelings, when these things come?
For the armed forces, if I was to put it in one word, it is honor. It is honor. Everything revolves around honor, be it the nation's honor, the regiment's honor, the battalion's honor, or your family's name. If you are a coward, they won't say, Sipahi so-and-so was coward. They say, Iska beta nalaik tha. He was the one who was coward. So you can't be that. And this is what motivates one to perform or even make the supreme sacrifice. If honor is lost, what is left? Money can come and go. Honor, once lost, can never return. So as the soldier is our prime weapon, we have to build trust, confidence, honesty, truthfulness, and many such characteristics which become vital to sustain the relationship within the armed forces and deliver to the honor at the various levels. I think this just says it all. This is the single most driving factor for the armed forces that makes them do what they do.
Thank you so much. Binaji, do I still have time, or what's your...
So we have a few questions, and Her Excellency
please go ahead.
Catherine Kiwi is waiting to ask a question. So can I invite Her Excellency Mrs. Catherine Kiwi to Ambassador of Estonia? Please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Binaji, and namaste to all family of Rtambhara. Thank you, General Narayan, for very insightful discussion. I don't have a question concerning the interoperability between armed forces of Navy, sea, and land, but rather how would you have some comments how diplomacy, government bureaucracy, and army leadership should work hand in hand in order to make our country for future-proof? As you know, diplomats and soldiers have many aspects in common. Like you mentioned, most lately the honor. If diplomats lose honor, it's also lost forever. And diplomats have to serve as well, be it inside or outside of their homeland or country. But of course, diplomats are trying to keep army away from the landscape as long as it is possible. But once diplomacy and negotiations fail or collapse, then the army has to take it over and play their instruments for a while at least. But then again, when army game is over, the diplomats and legal experts, they have to jump in and take it over to negotiate like a new agreement according to the new political and legal term, so that both sides are, or the enemies become like neighbors and normal partners again, and try to live up according to this new plan. What would be your, have you been witnessing this kind of moments where you have to take over and or give trust for a while, the diplomacy again? What would be your suggestions?
I think before
please.
Before Sanjeev ji takes over, I would like to thank Sister Catherine on this wonderful question. Sanjeev ji, looking at the present day's Afghan and Taliban war, and where we have been seeing reports that India has asked the diplomats and others to vacate Afghanistan, and what is going to be in the minds of the diplomats staying there, their families, and who are staying in the country and outside the country, and also like what Her Excellency says, after the war is over or after the kidnapping is over or things are over, these diplomats have to go back to negotiate these things. I think it's a very, very interesting question relevant to today's Afghan issue. Sanjeev ji?
Yeah, very true. See, how I put it, and I always say, the Ministry of Home Affairs sustains a police and employs it. Whereas the Ministry of External Affairs does not sustain the forces which it will eventually end up employing. So, to my mind, I may be, overstepping the brief. But I think the Ministry of External Affairs must sustain the forces that they are to apply. There will be better cooperation between the two agencies then. But this doesn't happen worldwide. It is just my thoughts and I'm speaking. So it happens so police will, the Ministry of Home Affairs will get police those weapons or those equipment because they know how they are going to apply them for and what for. Here, this is a mismatch. And so the MOD and the Ministry of Defense, which sustains the armed forces, and the Ministry of External Affairs normally are left hand and right hand, not knowing, may not be knowing. I should not be very harsh on this, that what is going on, or is the MOD able to see by the eyes of ME what may be required and vice versa. So this is a typical situation. However, whenever I travel for international cooperation, I would like to place on record that it has never been without the inputs of the Ministry of External Affairs. So it is not all that bad also. Even when I went to Afghanistan, and today the ambassador, the then ambassador, he was a high commissioner rather, was on the television, Gautam Mukhopadhyay ji, and we worked together. He first briefed us, and then it was wherever I was going, whether I was meeting their army chief or meeting their air chief, the brief was one. So this does happen, but yes, like she said, that the armed forces perhaps get a raw deal from the MEA. To that extent, understandable. Maybe if tomorrow things were to change in the world and MEA also sustain the forces, then they would understand the aspects about kitting and morale of the armed forces, and this gap between the two agencies may not remain. Now, as far as this is concerned, she rightly brought out, our diplomatic staff are as much exposed to the vagaries, or maybe more. We don't have, other than a defense attaché and an assistant defense attaché today in Afghanistan. But we will have a huge diplomatic staff available there, which are still doing their job. Yeah, so the threat is grave. We have lost people. We have lost defense attachés, or we have lost people of the diplomatic corps in Afghanistan before. So these threats are there. We understand. And I think all we can say is that, they're the last ones to leave. And when they leave, it's a signal. It's a signal of total breakdown of the relations, which are going to have ramifications for future.
Thank you. Thank you. Binaji?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine ji, for that question, and Sanjeev ji and Suresh ji. We have a few hands up. So can I call on Mr. Chandar Manar to ask his question, please? Please unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Veena. Good evening to all. This is Chandar Manar. Thanks to a wonderful session to Team Rtambhara Wellness, Guest of Honor, Major General Sanjeev Kumar, and Chief Guest, Mr. Chukapalli. My question is to Major General Sanjeev Narayan. I would like to hear your views on compulsory military service.
Right, Mr. Chandar, I made a brief mention during the conversation with Mr. Suresh, but the point is we have got enough. So do we need it? And compulsory would mean that people will come for a very short while. So you may have a disciplined civilian lot outside, but is it in the interest of the armed forces? Because they'll come for a short while and move on. So the Indian Army will only be training people and losing them. Here in our country, there's no dearth of soldiers. If there's a problem for officers. And that is where we have the short service commission, which is like a temporary thing because we fill up our deficiencies through short service. But if you go for a recruitment rally for a position of 10 people, you will have tens of thousands lined up there. So if we started having temporary service, even those 10 people who come for employment are going to, then not get their due or whatever it is. So it doesn't work in such a country.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Because of the numbers, it is not possible. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chandarji. Can we have Mubarak Ali please unmute?
Jain to all. Thanks for the insightful and inspiring session. Extending my sincere thanks to the organizer for this opportunity. My question to Major General: what one of the worst thing you have ever overcome or endured? Thanks for the opportunity, Jain sir.
No, come again, please. Sorry.
Sanjeev ji, what he says is, what is the worst situation you have ever seen in your life as a soldier?
It's difficult to single out one particular situation, but I suppose whenever you're under fire, it is the worst situation. That is, I am talking of while I'm at work in office, and at home every day is the worst situation.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much. Can we have Shrikant Badiga?
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for hosting this and very insightful thing. And Major General was at his best, and we learned a lot from his life experience. As our Chairman Emeritus Suresh Palisa said, it's very nostalgic to listen to it. And sir, I would like to just put forward the kind of discipline our Chairman Suresh Chikkapalli inculcated in all our group. We are 20-year-old group. And every moment of ours is so disciplined and dedicated. So that's how we have been ranked as most respected company in India. Sir, I would like to ask you a small thing, sir. How about a collaboration between the armed services and the police services to inculcate their discipline? What our sir was also trying to tell during his interaction with you. Like in most of these police services, we see a lot of indiscipline happening. Law and order has been well maintained, no doubt about it. But a lot of other corners, there are other loopholes are there where we do not find in the military. At the same time, in most of the countries, as our sir said, we could see the police departments are equally powerful. I mean, disciplined, powerful, and been holding the country. So, what way can we do that? That's number one, sir. Number two, in our education system, so once again, same thought from the same school where a chairman has come from. So how about inculcating this discipline in our school's curriculum as well? Make them understand how important the factor that discipline and dedication is not only reading or writing, but to really adopt. Especially really appreciate, sir, the way when you said, we got to take ourselves very seriously, even when they're dressing, even in the video calls also. We are supposed to be very serious about ourselves. So these are my two things to you, sir. And once again, thank you all for giving me this opportunity to post my question to the Major General. Thank you, sir.
The first question about discipline, though we discussed it, I'll come back to it once again. See, discipline is a matter of internal health of the organization. I would put it that way. And it is for the people there to see it. You cannot have somebody else teach you discipline. Discipline has to get inculcated from within. So army going and teaching discipline to police, I think there'll be resentment. On the next day, the police will shoot down the army. Or vice versa. Nobody can come and teach Indian army discipline. It has to teach us itself. So we are teaching ourselves and we are following it. That is the first thing. Now, teaching operationally, I think, is more important. And for the CRPF and other such forces which are involved in operations against the Maoist Maoist and was also in, basically Maoist, or even in J&K, we have conducted operational training, which is more of the requirement. I think that is something which by the nature of their job, they may not have learned. And we can pass on that expertise, which will help them save their own lives as also get operational gains. So that is in place and that is something we do. This aspect of discipline, like I brought out earlier also, firstly is their work environment is different. Maybe that is the reason. I don't want to comment upon it. And secondly, it's an internal health of the organization, which leads to this. Like you're saying in your organization, he is enforced discipline, means it is from within. It is, you cannot have another concern, another, person or business person come and get discipline in your company. It can't happen that way. It has to come from within. That is my thing. As far as the schools are concerned, I think it is linked with the numbers. Firstly said, we talked about, so maybe we need to look at a better role for the NCC, perhaps, or a deeper involvement. They are trying their best. DG NCC has been my friend and I've discussed at length with him. But I think what lacks is the true education, In some, I mentioned that before, one about the armed forces, what are our borders, what are the armed forces doing, what are the police doing, what are their rank structure. I mean, I find it difficult, even to explain that I'm not a major and I'm a general. So that is the kind of thing which is lacking. It is nobody's personal fault. It is lacking. We haven't even educated our men, our children in that. Civic sense. Civic sense is the discipline we need how to behave on the road, how to walk, how to drive. These are things which I think we need to devote more time. Something is being done about it, but much more time needs to be devoted to these aspects so that we come up with better citizens. Our concern is, I suppose, when you're talking about this, you're talking of why don't we have better citizens who follow the law of the land and the rules of the road. That is our concern for each one of us. We see a motorcycle go from our left, then from the right, and we get so frustrated how indisciplined the people are on the road. So these are aspects of, I think, civic sense, which have to be drilled in well in our schools. I think a lot of effort has been made towards cleanliness, but we've got miles to go before we sleep, and so on and so forth. So these efforts, I think, in general in school will help, rather than, army has got its job cut out, and a lot of things are happening. Rather than looking inwards, they need to look outwards, and we let them be there. Army does man the NCC and has provided that much there. But what about all of us? If we know what we need, why don't we put our heads towards it and make it happen? Thank you.
Binaji?
Sir, one thing. Sorry, sir. Sorry, can I make a point here?
We're out of time, so thank you so much for your question. And I would like to now call on our program director.
Madam, with your permission.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
30 seconds only. I need 30 seconds only. Can I speak for 30 seconds, please?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Sir, inculcating discipline and organizing the which you said, sir. Sir, in our organization, as a part of a CSR, our sir has developed this modern crematorium in the name of Vaikuntham Mahaprasthana. So the most neglected sector now we have changed into a part of social infrastructure, where we got the recognition at the state level and at the central level, and the entire sector is so disciplined now. It's a sea change in the last 4 or 5 years. So as you rightly said, sir, the discipline should come within, and good practices would certainly help. So that's what I'm saying. Yes. Yes,
Srikanth, this is a different topic. Let us move on. Binaji?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's, I think we've actually crossed the time by a long shot, but it's been a very, very interesting and, insightful conversation between the two of you. Thank you so much. And may I now call our program director, Sri Krishnapani K.C. Raju, to do the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Binaji. I wish to profusely thank Major General Sanjeev Narayan ji and Sri Suresh Chukapalli ji. It has been one of the best sessions which Rtambhara has hosted over the past 1.5 years. And we're so thankful to Major General Sanjeev Narayan ji for giving us such beautiful insights. And he has brought in his own personal experiences and given them a new dimension to it. At the very beginning, I like the 3Ds which he has mentioned about direction, determination, and dedication. And the whole space of Rtambhara is into wellness and oriented more towards the spiritual dimension of it. But I see a lot of parallels in this. When you talked about making you almost become like dust and deconstruct you and then reconstruct in the NDA, starting with the haircut. It is something very akin to what we call as sannyasa. You are made to deposit or completely put everything in the service of the nation. And the nation for us is no less than God. So that's a beautiful dimension which you have brought in. And I've been taking profusely a lot of notes while you were speaking, and I could see that you have mentioned about 4 or 5 very important dimensions during the training, or the characteristics which you have imbibed during the training, mainly mental strength and determination, focus, and no excuses and value for time. Because in the armed forces, you are almost on a daily basis exposed to death. in some form or the other. And death doesn't enter into any kind of discussion. Either you are alive or you are dead. So the value of time and not giving excuses is something which is imbibed right at the training level. And during the career, when you talked about the various characteristics, I think you have mentioned about 10 or 12 of them. But I would say that even if we are able to imbibe 1 or 2 of them really, the rest of them would automatically follow. And there was an important dimension which you talked about, the dignity in life and death. And in this context, I would like to really thank our Honorable Chief Guest today, Suresh Chukapalli, because he is providing that dignity in death through the new age crematoria which he has created. And I have been very fortunate to actually and physically see the kind of facilities that he has provided. Though it's not a good occasion that we visit the crematorium, but he has taken away that somberness, that gloom and other things from it and provided such a seamless integration with nature. And he is doing such excellent work. And I think the armed forces, when they are providing that dignity in life, and for the common man, Suresh Chukapalli is providing that dignity in death. And I have one important point to make, that after listening to you, Major General, I think the armed forces, the people in the armed forces have more faith in God than the so-called godmen and all the persons who seem to be practicing spirituality.
Undoubtedly.
So that's something which is wonderful, actually. And that's what is supposed to be imbibed. And you have very beautifully summed up the philosophy of the training which you have and the services which impart you, that is hoping for the best and preparing or planning for the worst. And finally, I think it is honor that matters for everybody, individually, collectively, for the society and for the country at large. So it is truly an honor to have you on our show. And I would like to profusely thank all the participants also, especially Her Excellency Catherine Kiwi and other esteemed honorary consuls who have joined us as participants in this program. And finally, I think it is the right time to honor ourselves and our nation on this occasion, which is the 75th Independence Day, which we are celebrating day after tomorrow. Thank you so much again to all the participants on behalf of Rtambhara Wellness. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Thank you so much and good night.
Jai Hind. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Good night, man.